Hi, I'm Dr. Frank A. Thomas, and this is another installment of the African American Preaching Legacy Series here at Christian Theological Seminary in Indianapolis, Indiana, where we are privileged to bring you the brightest, the best, the most profound preachers that we can find to explore, to discuss, to talk about the African American preaching tradition. And we have as our very special guest, Reverend Dr. Jessica Kendall Ingram. She is a retired Episcopal Supervisor in the AME Church, fabulous preacher, fabulous woman of God. We are going to share, and we're just excited to have you here this morning.
Well, thank you, Dr. Thomas. I am honored. I have watched numerous of these interviews, and I'm like, this is a real God moment for me. And I pray that I make it through without crying. Seriously.
Well, tears
Only God would have me in this seat with you today. And I'm grateful.
We're grateful to have you, and just know that tears are understood in this place. This is a safe space. Tears are understood. So you won't be the first to cry, I won't be the last to cry, including me. I was on with Bishop John Bryant trying to hold back the tears, my own self.
Yeah, I watched him.
You watched it? Oh yeah, it was a fabulous interview. So, just in case there might be some people who do not know you.
A lot of people don't know me. You're very kind.
What would you like for people to know about you?
Well, I am 77, and in July I'll be 78.
Wow, congratulations.
And I don't mind telling my age because God has been kind to me. You know, as the old folk used to pray, have a reasonable portion of health and strength. And most days I'm in my right mind. And so I am grateful for these 70 years. I've been married to Gregory Ingram for 47 years. We recently retired from service in the AME Church of 43, 44 years. We retired in 2021, and so we are just into the rhythm of retirement. In the years that we served the AME Church, we served 4 local churches, Alton, Illinois, Allen AME, St. John in Springfield, Illinois. We kept going up. And then Chicago, where I met you.
Quinn Chapel.
At Quinn Chapel, and then Oak Grove in Detroit for 13 years. And then my husband was elected as a bishop in the AME Church in the year 2000. And in the AME Church, you don't serve a local church in a district. And so we had to give up Oak Grove AME Church. He announced that he was going to aspire for the episcopacy in March of 1997. I cried every Sunday. From March of 1997 to 2000, because I knew in my heart that he was going to be elected. And Oak Grove was such a wonderful church. It still is today, but it was a wonderful experience being there. And so I didn't want to leave, but I knew that God had called him to serve. And so when he was elected, we were assigned to the 15th district. In the AME Church, you preside over geographic districts. So we were assigned to the 15th district, which was South Africa, and we were there for 4 years. And then in 2004, we were assigned to the 10th district, which is the state of Texas, and we were there for 8 years. Your assistant was asking me, do you get to choose where you go? I said, no, ma'am. You don't get to choose. You may desire to go there, but there's an Episcopal committee that makes the decision based upon the vote of the delegation. Well, most times they go with what the delegation say, but sometimes it changes. So anyway, we were in Texas until 2012, and then from 2012 to 2021, we served the 1st district, which consisted of Bermuda, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Delaware, Rhode Island, Yes, it was all those states. Right. And so you preside over all of these churches. And so anyway, so we were supposed to retire in 2020, but COVID came. And so the General Conference was changed, to 2021, and we ended up serving another year, which is difficult because we didn't get to see our people. Our last year and a half was done through Zoom and through that. So that time was challenging for us. But I've only known African Methodism all of my life. I grew up in St. Louis. My parents, Finley and Samantha Kendall, neither one were neither one were pastors or in the ministry, but they were very dedicated church persons. And so I grew up in a family of 4 of us, a nuclear family. I had 2 brothers, both of them are deceased now, and my sister and myself. And my parents were very, very committed. I don't want to say to the work of the church, they were committed to living a Christian life. And as I look back on my life now, I see how they were just such solid persons. And so I grew up in Wayman AME Church, and that was a church that was very affirming of young people and always made me feel good about who I was. And so I spent years at Wayman. Wayman was what we call a blue-collar church in St. Louis. We shouted. When I tell you we shouted, by the time Reverend Pointer got through singing, some through the fire and some through the, I'm telling you, we would go in. We would go in. So I had a really good childhood in terms of the church community, my parents, and what they instilled in us. And so that's kind of who I am. I left out a number of years, but we would be here for a long time.
Yeah. So tell me how that matriculated into a call.
Wow. I've thought about that as I have listened to other persons talk about their call. I would say my call has been progressive. First of all, I knew nothing about anybody being called to preach, period. And in my church, there were 2 women. They were evangelists, and I never heard them preach. I, saw them read scriptures and pray. But as I thought about it, my pastor, Reverend Samuel Pointer, was very committed to young people. And this is back in the 50s, so I remember we moved out to Big Wayman, as it's called, Kings Highway in Cabot, and Reverend Pointer had a junior church for us. And so in between Sunday school and junior church, we had full church. My brother played the piano for junior church first, and then my sister, and then me. We played the same 2 songs every Sunday, What a Fellowship and What If every Sunday without fail. So Reverend Pointer would have the young people to speak. And so he asked me one Sunday if I would speak. I was 9. I said, okay, Reverend Pointer. And I remember I talked about the feeding of the 5,000. I don't know what the heck I was saying, but it felt nice. But so I did it. Then I went away to college. I had a good time in college, trust me.
Where'd you go? Where'd you go?
I went to the University of Missouri in Columbia. Okay. And so when I graduated from college and came back home and started going back to church, because I didn't go too much in school. I hope I don't tell too much. I was the party girl, do you hear me? The party started with me and the party ended with me. But when I came back home, I started going back to church. And so Reverend Pointer would have youth Sundays, the 4th Sunday. So one youth Sunday, he asked me if I would do the Decalogue. Now, in those days, and you have to be AME, the Decalogue was long, and we did the full Decalogue every Sunday. And so he asked me if I would do it. Yeah, I'll do it. I did the Decalogue, and the people got to shouting. I said, what in the world? They were really shouting on me reading the Decalogue. And so then after that happened, Reverend Party said, well, I want you to bring the message the next fourth Sunday. I'm like, what? Now listen to me. I had one foot in the world and one foot in And he asked me if I would do the fourth Sunday. I said, okay. So I can remember very clearly the message was the Jesus Revolution, because this was back, in the early 70s. And after I wrote it, I read it to my mother, and she got to crying. I said, well, what in the world? So when I gave that message that Sunday morning, the church went, I told you, Wayman was a shouting, rank shouting, fall out when the nurses come, with fans and all of that. And they got to shouting again. I said, I don't know what this is. And I was like Jonah, I went the total opposite way of it. And honest to goodness, I had no idea about a call. And so that happened. I went on about my business. Then I was elected as a delegate to the Missouri Annual Conference. In the AME Church, you have annual conferences, and you have lay delegates from your local church. So I was like about 27, 20. They always saw in me what I did not see in myself. And so they elected me as a delegate to the Missouri Annual Conference. And during that conference, he's deceased now, Bishop Frank Curtis Cummins. At that time, he was Reverend Cummins. Came to me, he said, Bishop Frank Reed is looking for persons to go and serve as missionaries in Monrovia, Liberia. I said, why are you telling me? He said, because I think he would like for you to come. And I said, no, sir, Reverend, I'm not interested in that at all. Sermons really do change your life. On that Friday in October of 1974, Bishop Reed preached mortician versus midwife in the church. And he asked the question, are you giving birth or are you killing the church? I was so moved by his message that I literally ran to Reverend Cummins and I told him, tell Bishop Reed I'll go. That was in October of 1974. In order for me to go to serve, he wanted me to serve as a missionary teacher at our school there in Monrovia College. And in order for me to go, I said, well, how much money will I be making? And he said, $200 a month. I said, really? But in order for me to go, I knew that I could not maintain the financial responsibilities that I had and go there and serve. So I filed bankruptcy. I lost everything. I lost everything. I didn't have credit for 7 years. I remember being in my apartment and they came and took my car. So I went and served in 1975. I left for Liberia in February of 1975. I did not know Bishop Reed or his wife, Supervisor Irene Reed. I went over there and I lived with Fred and Barbara Lucas, who had been there for a few months. So I served there for a year. I didn't come back home. Got involved with Eliza Turner AME Church. And Fred and Barbara were having a revival and they asked me to pray. And I prayed. And the anointing, I didn't know the word anointing at the time, but the anointing fell in the church and I was like, God, you're doing something here. So I stayed there for a year, came back home, and then people just assumed that I could talk. And so I started getting invited to give messages on missionary days. And I remember enjoying writing the messages and the effect that my words had on the persons that heard. But again, I had no idea that there was a calling on my life. Anyway, fast forward, my husband and I end up in Chicago at Quinn Chapel. And one Women's Day, Reverend Cecilia Bryan was our Women's Day speaker. And she preached a message, the garden versus the kingdom. These versus sermons get to me. So she asked, how long are you going to stay in the garden, or are you going to do the work of the kingdom? And I was so moved by that sermon that I went home, and the next morning I got on my knees. I said, God, what is it that you want me to do? So I told my husband, I said, I'm going to quit my job. I was a high school counselor in Evanston, Illinois, and I'm going to go to Garrett. He said, okay, if that's what you want to do. I said, but I'm going for Christian education. That's right. He said, okay. So I went to Garrett. I enrolled in Christian education. I remember being at a connection meeting and John Bryan saying to me, you protest too much. You know you called to preach. I said, no, Bishop, I'm called to Christian education. So I go, this is a long story. So I go to Garrett. And because I had been speaking, I said, well, I think I'll take a preaching class just to kind of, get a little. And Heisel Taylor was my preaching instructor. So when you do your sermon, they would critique it. Right. So I did my sermon, and everybody was crying. Nobody critiqued me. I said, what in the world? So then I had to do another one, and this time we were in the chapel. When I finished preaching, I ran to the bathroom and started crying. I said, I don't know what this is, God. So my last year there, Marcia Foster Boyd was at that time Marcia Stewart, and she was in Little Rock, Arkansas, Mount Nebo AME Church, College Station. And she was giving a women's conference, and she asked me if I would come. Now, I want you to keep in mind, Mount Nebo is the home church of my family. I was born in Little Rock, Arkansas. So her husband is pastoring my family's home church. So I get on the train and go down to Little Rock. And all the way there, I felt this weight on me that just would not go away. So when I got there, I said to Marcia, Marcia, how do you know that God is calling you to preach? And she said, girl, ask for a sign. I said, no. I ain't asking for no sign. But that night I could not sleep, and I said, God, if you are calling me to preach, this woman who's preaching tomorrow, who was Claudette Anderson Copeland.
That's a danger. I see the danger. I got danger. I
did not know Claudette. We had just met at the little church. I said, if her sermon has anything to do with the call to ministry, then I'll know you called me. So we there in a little country church. We having a good time. They singing, and I'm sitting on the front row. And so Dr. Copeland, Reverend Claudette, gets up and she announces her text. The gifts and calling of God are irrevocable. And she said, my message this morning is the call to ministry. I said, oh my God. Oh my goodness. I sat there with my mouth hanging open for an hour because she's not a short preacher. And when she finished preaching, I ran to the altar and I said, I yield. And I tell people now, I know for sure. And later, when Dr. Copeland and I were, we worked on our demands together, and we would stay together. And she told me one night, she said, the night before that sermon that I preached on that Sunday, God literally turned me around in the bed and changed my sermon. She said, that is not what I had planned to preach. And so here I am. That was 40 years ago,
Wow.
1984, March of 1984.
Wow, wow. That's an amazing call story. And I'm sure that our audience is just going to be blessed by it. It's just an amazing. So I want to go to the gift of the preaching. Mm-hmm. So I guess I'll start with, if you were to classify your preaching, how would you classify your preaching?
I've thought about that as I have heard you ask that question to other persons. And I heard Renita say, well, I don't know how to classify my preaching. And I'm not sure in terms of, let me say this, I'm not a storyteller. I don't tell stories well at all. I probably have used 2 illustrations in the whole time that I have preached. Someone said to me the other day, I said, how would you classify my preaching? And he said, expository. I said, really? What is that? Because I never really had thought about it, but I have given it a lot of thought since I have been listening to all of these profound preachers and et cetera. And I don't know, Dr. Thomas, I think for me, my preaching is about helping persons to see themselves in the text, but more so helping them to see where God is in their lives as God speaks through the text. I know that ultimately I want people to feel closer to God, even in the midst of the vicissitudes of life. And people are going through so much these days that I want to preach in a way that, you know, the old folk used to say, I'd rather see a sermon than hear a sermon. And so for me, is that I want people to see in me the relationship that I have with God that has enabled me to read this text and to see the moves of God in the text, and then to try to present that in a way and people will say, oh, I see. And so even though I'm dealing with this, I can keep going because I know that God is with me. And I'm probably more into that kind of thought process with my preaching because of my own life experiences and what I have gone through, particularly in these past few years. So it's just, for me, it's just kind of I don't think that I use a lot of big words. I don't always quote a lot of people, just from the heart. Just from the heart.
So how do you prepare a sermon?
I thought about that too. I knew this question was coming.
So you've done your homework. You have done your homework.
I got notes. Well, you know what, Dr. Thomas, for me, let me say this. In 1982, when we were in Chicago, and that church was very challenging, and I was working hard. I wasn't in ministry at the time. But the Lord clearly spoke to me, and I'm not one who says that I hear the voice of God clearly all the time. But God spoke to me and said, you are working for me, but you don't know me because you don't spend time with me. And at that time, God told me what I needed to do every morning, and that is to get up, and before I start doing anything else in the day, to spend time with God, to have me a journal that I write in, to have meditation books that I read, and the Bible, and then get down on my knees and pray. And I have been consistent in that since 1982. And now that I'm retired, I have even more time. But it is in most of my sermons come to me during my quiet time with God. And I keep journals, and so when the Lord begins to speak to me, I write my thoughts in the back of the journal. And so I have all kind of thoughts, and as they come, I just write them. So by the time I get ready to write the sermon, then I have these notes that I feel are God-inspired and God-breathed. And so once I get the thought for the sermon or the text, sometimes I'm reading a scripture, and it'll come to me, okay, you need to say this about that. So by the time I get ready to write the sermon, you know, you train to go to your commentaries and do your exegesis. A lot of times I don't find that it necessarily goes in the direction that I want to go, but I want to be sure that I'm reading and that I'm doing the proper exegetical work of the text so that it's not just me. Usually by the time I write a sermon, I write it in one setting. I'm able to write it straight through, and I write by hand. Then I go back and I type. And and when I preach, I cannot preach from those iPads. I did that one time, and it was horrible. When I tell you, horrible. And so I preach from my manuscript. But the preparation for me is about the time that I spend in the presence of God. And I believe that when the Lord is speaking to me, God knows the audience that I'm going to speak to and gives me what I need to say to them. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. Okay. Yeah.
That wasn't deep and profound, huh?
Well, the issue is not deep and profound. It is deep and profound because it's effective. You know, so you're bearing fruit in people. So if you're bearing fruit in people, it's effective. Now, whether we got the big names, they pay homiletics professors to name stuff, right? That's what you get paid for, right? So we name stuff. But the bottom line is, if it's working, keep doing it. So I tell people, I'm supposed to be helping you, but if trying to name it, label it, bothers you and it throws you off, no, you can't go to heaven and say, I was listening to my homiletics professor and it threw me off. No, God said, well, I gave you a gift. So, your gift, go with the gift. Yeah. If I sat down and listened to you long enough and enough times, I could name it. But that's not the issue. The issue is your effectiveness with people, and we're talking, and you're on this platform because you're a fabulous preacher, and you reach the lives of people.
Thank you.
And we want to spread what you're doing so other folks can reach the lives of people. So you know the question I'm going to ask you. So I guess you ready for the next one. So tell me a time that you preached when the Lord just blessed beyond what you could even imagine.
Well, actually, that happened to me very recently. Last month, I was asked by Bishop Reginald Jackson to preach at the 2nd District. I think it was the mid-year meeting. So, at those meetings, you got the bishop that's there, and it ended up that Bishop John Bryan was there, and he walked in the room, and I said, oh, my God. And then also Bishop Erica Crawford, who was just elected. So you got 3 bishops sitting up there, and then you have all of the preachers and pastors in the 2nd Episcopal District, which is one of the premier districts in the AME Church.
So where is the 2nd District?
The 2nd District is Maryland, the D.C. area, Virginia, North Carolina. Yeah. You got major churches there. Right. You got Matthew Wilder. He wasn't there. I was glad. You got Reed Temple, Ebenezer, the Brownings, Belt of Baltimore, all these churches. And so Bishop Jackson asked me if I would preach the noon hour power. I said, okay. So when I go there, I got a sermon, I'm gonna be honest. It was a sermon that I had preached, because they say in those settings you take a horse, okay? So it was a sermon that I had preached, but I revised it, to fit the occasion. So I get there, and that Thursday night, Bishop Crawford preached, and she was just really good, really good. So I go back to my room, and my ego gets the best of me. I said, Lord, I'm going to go into this file and find something else, something else to preach that impress the people. And so I was going over that sermon, and I said, no, that is absolutely not going to work. Go back to what you were going to preach. So the word that God had given to me was from Genesis, the 26th chapter, when Isaac dug the wells. And so my message was, God will make room for us. And Dr. Thomas, the Lord was kind, because the Spirit was there. I mean, the choir, they were singing. They were breaking out. I said, ooh, thank you, Jesus. It was a good worship atmosphere. And God showed up in the. I didn't see anybody's face. I don't know what they were doing, but I know when I finished and I looked up, you know how when you're really preaching these days, how they kind of storm the pulpit? Yeah. I looked up and they were all, I said, oh, but it was just such a healing moment for me too. Honest to God, because my husband and I have been through much. And for me to stand and preach in front of people who know our story and who know what has happened to us, and for me to preach and not be caught up in what anybody was thinking, whatever their opinion was of me, I just wanted to preach the word. And it was an amazing experience. It really was.
I think that your humility is your power. I think that, you can have all this other stuff, and you have it. I mean, you can have methods, you can have titles, you can have style, you can have. But if you don't have humility, and I think that your humility as you approach, even as you tell stories about how did I get up on this stage, and the awareness that God got you up on the stage is a level of humility that God's going to reward. So I get it. And it's hard to teach humility. In classrooms, you see it. You teach, you get 15 students, and in 10 minutes you can tell who God might think, or I might think is teachable. And that humility, it just comes through, and when you put that in your experience, it just blows. I had you do revival at my church in Chicago. Right? 3 nights.
Yeah. Back in the day when revival was 3 straight nights, not one night a week for the whole month.
And you did a fabulous job. And it's the humility. People receive humility. And I think it adds to all your other gifts. Okay, now, let me go back on the other side of the thing and say, okay, when was it the most difficult time, the hardest time, and you yet had to press to preach?
Well, without a doubt, it was when I was asked to, quote unquote, lecture at Hampton. And even though they say lecture, they expect you to preach. First of all, I was amazed that I got the call. I mean, seriously. When the president called me, I said, you sure you got the right person? He said, yes, you were recommended and we want you to do 2 lectures. I said, oh my goodness. So the preparation for that was grueling for me. I mean, for 6 months, that's all I could think about. And I had heard these horror stories about how the only other AME woman that had, and I hope I'm not saying too much, that had spoken there, that they got up and walked out on her. And I said, oh my God, I don't want that to happen to me. But the preparation was very difficult, and so what I decided to do was to get Reverend Dr. Raquel Latson to help me, because the text that they had was that in Mark, when the disciples could not deliver the boy, and Jesus said, "This comes about." Anyway, so Raquel worked with me, and I was very intimidated by asking her to help me, because, I mean, the girl is a scholar. I mean, a true scholar. But she was kind and generous, and so I would write my lecture, and she would tell me what I needed to do and mark things up, and I had to put my ego to the side, because, I'm not accustomed to letting anybody look at my work. So we got through the first lecture. And so when I presented the second one to her, I thought it was pretty good. So she read it, and she emailed me back. She said, "When you finish this, let me know." I'm like, "What?" I thought I had done a good job.
You thought you were finished.
So I went back and I had to work on it again. And in my mind, I'm like, this woman is a New Testament scholar, and you have got to get this right. And then I kept hearing these voices saying, they're going to walk out on you. They're going to get up and leave when you get up. So anyway, and keep in mind, I'd only been to Hampton one time, because it always falls at a time when we would have something going on in the district. So the preparation for that was just too much for me. It really was. I thought I was going to literally fall out when I got up there. And when I was back in the green room, I can't remember who was speaking before me, but I was like, oh my God, he's talking about the same issues that I'm going to talk about. But then he kind of went another way, and I breathed. And when I walked out there to stand before that crowd, I was sitting in the audience, and after the morning preacher ended, everybody started walking out. And so they walking out because they don't know me. Somebody said, they going to the bathroom, calm down. Oh my God. And so it was just very hard. And I've heard other people talk about preparing for Hampton, how for a year, Carolyn Knight said for a year, she couldn't sleep. It is intimidating. It isn't, but the Lord was kind. I got through. Yeah. I got through.
See, again, the humility gets you through, that you would go to a New Testament scholar and be teachable as it. Even, all of us learn through red ink. I don't care how, when it really gets down to it, and some of that red ink hurts, right? When it comes back let me know when you're through. I thought I was through. Why wouldn't I send it to you if I didn't think I was through? And then you go back and you get over the pain, you regroup, and then it comes out to be absolutely fabulous because, again, humility gets you through. I can't stress that enough. You're such a testament to it. And I had no idea I would say that to you. It's just flowing in the interview, but I think it's a message to people who are watching this. Humility will get you through. God will bless. I mean, do I need to quote scripture? God, humble yourself and He will lift you up. All of these things. So, I'm just excited to get to know you at such a deep level about this, because it is your preaching. It is your gift. But God can't use anybody that ain't humble. Or God uses most, how about that? The people who submit to God.
But 40 years later, I'm still amazed that God has called me. And I'm amazed now that people are still asking me to preach.
Yeah.
Still asking me to preach.
Ask you to be interviewed. Ask you, All right, so I want to talk a little bit about Episcopal Supervisor.
You're supposed to ask me about my mentors. That's the next question.
Okay, well, I'll do that. Yeah. All right, I'll do that. Tell me about some of your mentors. She has done her homework.
Oh my goodness. Stop making me, are you going to edit this out?
No, we may, but we may just leave it, let it run. Okay, all right, so tell me something about your preaching mentors.
Okay, we'll come back. Maybe we'll run out of time. Anyhow, I've thought about that too. And I think, Dr. Thomas, it's been more so that there have been persons in my life who have influenced me in terms of how I see myself, the confidence that I need in myself. I think about when I took the theology of Howard Thurman and the 3 basic questions he asked: who are you, what do you want, and how do you propose to get it? And there have been persons in my life that have helped me to answer those questions. So I'm gonna name a number of persons. When I was in Chicago, Willie Taplin Barrow at Push, and Addie White at Church of God. Those 2 women gave me confidence that when God speaks to me, to move out and do what God says. Don't look to the right, don't look to the left. Then there was Reverend Esther Mitchell and Reverend Lucille Jackson, who were 2 women that co-pastored, even though they did not get co-pastor appointments. They started a church in Maywood. They were Holy Ghost-filled women for real. And Reverend Esther Mitchell and Lucille Jackson taught me about holiness, that what you preach, you should try to live, and that when people see you, they should see the Spirit of God in you. Then there was Reverend Brenda Little.
Mm-hmm. I remember.
The first time I was going to do a revival, I called Reverend Brenda, and I said, can you come and sit with me and help me to know how to do this? And so we met at a restaurant in Hyde Park, and it was a simple statement. But Reverend Little said to me, you got to bathe that revival in prayer. Bathe it in prayer. And I never forgot that, because I loved and admired me some Reverend Brenda Little. So Reverend Brenda Little, then when we came to Detroit, Reverend Mary Watson Stewart and Reverend Artilla Bellis, 2 older women who embraced me, who again helped me to believe in myself, and who were Holy Ghost-filled women. But you know what they really taught me? No matter how old you get, keep on wearing your heels. That's why I got on my heels right now. I'm telling you the truth. Those 2 women dressed. And I used to say, when I get to be their age, I'm gonna still wear my heels. But Mary Watson Stewart and Mary Watson Stewart could pray you into heaven. Oh my God, when I think about it now. So they were influences in my life. And then I have to say this, God has given me a group of girlfriends. And in our relationships, I feel that I have been mentored through the times that we have spent together, and that I have learned from them in preaching. I can't prepare a sermon without thinking about Renita. What would Doc say about this text? Reverend Elaine, from her, I've learned about words and how to put those words in the right place. Reverend Claudette, go deeper, get into the interior of the person. Reverend Dr. Joanne Browning, stay focused. Don't preach to get the reaction of the people. Preach what you know God has given you. and Reverend Dr. Cynthia Hales to learn how to stand. I can't stand tall. I'm not as tall as you. But to stand there flat-footed and be confident in what you're doing. And Gina Stewart is a part of our girlfriend circle, so I'm like, I can't write this sermon without thinking about Gina and how Gina is able to go. So I've just been, as I think about it, I've been tremendously blessed to have some wonderful preaching women in my life.
Yeah. I want to, sometimes we memorialize people who have gone on, and because they have not.
And wait a minute, I'm sorry. Reverend Cecilia Williams Bryan, how could I forget her? I mentioned her, okay.
Okay, yeah. Anything you want to say about her?
Well, see, again, I guess I keep saying that these are persons who instill confidence in me because there's a level of insecurity, you know. And so God has put women in my life that have helped me to identify those places of insecurity. And Reverend C believed in me when I didn't know who I was or where I was going. And she's been a person that I could call, and she knows how to go right there.
Yeah. I want to go back and memorialize Brenda Little. And I want you to say a little bit about that because there are names, people who deserve to have books written about them, but they never, and hopefully we're dropping a breadcrumb, which means that somebody will pick up the breadcrumb you're dropping about Brenda Little because she deserves a bigger space. Yeah. So I want you to talk about her a little bit. I knew her, I preached with her, we were in Chicago, friends, all of that. But I want you however, it don't have to be long, have to be short, be anything. I want to set a marker of her name. So maybe somebody will come along and study who she was and what she did.
And so many people, as you are mentioning her name, I think don't know Reverend Little and who she was and the season in which she lived when to be a Baptist woman, preacher, and a hooper. And you know, when I first met Brenda, I said, this woman too pretty to be preaching like you. She was a good-looking woman that loved to dress, but when she mounted that pulpit, oh my God, there was just such an anointing on her. And Brenda was humble. Yeah. She really was. And
she lived with the stereotype that she was trying to be a man. She was trying to preach like a man. And she lived with that and fought that, you know, to carve space for herself and you know, for other women. And we used to do the 7 last words at Trinity together.
Oh, yeah.
And she would every year she'd be there, and I just loved her preaching. And she was a hooper now. She was gone, you know. I used to tell them, don't put me behind her, you know, because I ain't no hooper. You know, you
and
need two
I doubt
hoopers
if anything is written about Reverend Brenda. I haven't. Well, there are a lot of women that there's nothing written about, but I think something has to be said for who she was and what she offered to the church and to the body of Christ in that season when she started pastoring. She got a church. Well, we used to have a group in Chicago. We called ourselves the Midwest Clergy Association. And Brenda had started a church. It was somewhere on the south side, I can't remember. Ooh, we would go there on Sunday nights, and you talking about having church. Oh my God. We would have a time. And then we would leave there and go over to Reverend Little's house and eat fried chicken and all of that. Those were some good days. S.C. Clark, and I'm trying to remember other names. You know S.C.?
I know S.C. Clark, yeah. We preached together, you know. For those who, y'all probably familiar, I spent 18 years of pastoring in Chicago.
Were you there 18 years?
I'm there New Faith 18 years.
Oh my God.
I grew up on the south side of Chicago, so all these folks, we're talking Chicago right now, so all these folks, these names that they're calling, we all cut our teeth together.
Oh yeah, those were the days.
We cut our teeth together. So, all right,
Is that it?
Nope. Tell me about the Episcopal Supervisor.
Okay. In the AME church, when your spouse, and we say spouse now because it used to be only men until Bishop Vashti came along. When your spouse is elected as a bishop, you automatically become the Episcopal Supervisor. So in my case, here I am an itinerant elder in the AME church. And once I became an ordained minister, I was not involved with the Women's Missionary Society. When you're an Episcopal Supervisor, let me back up, you oversee the work of the Women's Missionary Society. There's a local missionary society in every church, and then you have the conference level and the district level. So you oversee the work of the Women's Missionary Society and the YPD. Well, once I became Young People's Division. Okay. Everybody's not AME, right? That's right. So once I became an itinerant elder, and the Constitution of the Women's Missionary Society says that itinerant elders cannot be members of the Women's Missionary Society. So I said, okay, y'all don't want me, fine. And so I did not work with them. I would advise them at my local church at Oak Grove. And so when my husband got elected, I automatically became the Episcopal Supervisor. This is a role that had not been, as I shared earlier, occupied by an itinerant elder, because up until Bishop Vashti was elected, all Episcopal supervisors were women. And so the Reverend Cecilia Williams Bryant was the first ordained elder to serve as Episcopal Supervisor. And then I came along. But Reverend C's way of operating is different than mine. There's only one, Reverend Cecilia Williams Bryant. And she would not be boxed in. Well, I'm more concerned about how people would think about me, so I said, okay, you're gonna have to fit in. I don't know what translation I read, but I remember reading the translation that said, wives, fit in with your husband's plans. So Dr. Thomas, I tried to fit in with my husband's plan. Actually, I saw the work of the Women's Missionary Society as ministry. And so that's how I approached it. So it wasn't a weight for me, except I couldn't quite figure out how do I do this as the Episcopal Supervisor and still be the preacher that I know that God had called me to be. And I really feel that there were opportunities that I did not get because I was viewed as an Episcopal Supervisor and boxed in too. And so trying to fit in with the other supervisors at the time when it was only Reverend C and I who were itinerant elders, in worship services, having to go from participating in the worship services and all to sitting on the third row with my hat. And by the way, when I retired, I gave away 200 hats. I don't have not one. No, really, sitting out there on the third row, you know, fitting in. And I did the best I could to fit in. And finally, about 3 years before we got ready to retire, I said to my husband, I said, Gregory, I'm going to start participating in worship. I'm going to start being up there in the pulpit. And that's what I did. I said, if people cannot accept me who I am by now, then I'm sorry. And so it took me that long to make the decision, because I just did not want people having a lot. I did not want to be a liability to my husband. I wanted to be an asset to him. I'm gonna stop there.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that, the struggle of that, the honesty of that, the humility of that. Because all of us, in one way or another, don't quite fit in. And we make a decision, and we don't want to be a liability to God. We don't want to be a liability to the church. But then something rises in us.
Yeah, enough is enough.
Right. Something rises in us, and this is, you know, I think that if we go to a preaching level, sometimes you make that decision as a preacher. This is who I am. You know, Jeremiah Wright was my mentor, and I can't preach like Jeremiah Wright. I have to preach like Frank Thomas. Or I can't preach like, you know, I can learn, borrow, be inspired by, but fundamentally at some point I have to say,
this is who I am.
This is who I am, and this is how God has given me to share through the uniqueness of my person that is God-given, my understanding of the Word. And you calm down.
Yeah.
And then you do need less approval from the crowd. And it's almost like you begin to sometimes preach for an audience of one.
Yeah.
Because this is what it is. And I can't be, you know, I'm not a hooper. And I love it. Martha Simmons says, every preacher would be a hooper if they could.
Yeah.
And she ain't lying. She right. I would if I could. You know Edward Brass. I know you Edward Brass.
You know what? I was just getting ready to say, now that's a hooper. I'm going to see you this week because I'm going to the conference on there. Yeah. My husband and I, when we hear him and he gets ready, we say, here you go. It's just like, I said, how you do that?
So at his conference, this is the Voice of the Prophet conference years ago, he was just giving side remarks, and he explained to me why, I wasn't a hooper. Well, he wasn't explaining to me, but he explained to everybody. So he said, if you don't understand scales, you can't hoop. That hit me like a ton of bricks. Oh, that's why I can't be a hooper, But you come to who you are, I guess, and the struggle of coming to the place that we're comfortable with ourselves. This is how God made me. And there are, some invitations you don't get based upon who you are.
That's true.
And that's okay.
That's true.
I'm taking too much of this, but
that's okay.
I love this text where Jesus comes to, in Luke 4, comes to his home folk. And he starts talking about that the gospel is bigger than just this Jewish thing, and they want to throw him off the cliff, right? And the text says, and he walked right through them. And then the next verses, I think in the next chapter says, and he went to Capernaum and they heard him gladly, right? There's always a crowd.
There's always.
That'll hear you gladly.
Absolutely.
Except we focus on
the circles that we don't get in.
Exactly.
The places that we don't get invited.
Exactly. So I just thank you so much for the interview. Anything that you would like to say that I have not asked you, I'm going to give you open mic. You can say, I would ask you, what are the current trends in preaching that you see? You can say that, or anything you want to say. It's completely open mic.
Well, I'll say that when you mention trends in preaching, and I certainly don't want to sound judgmental, but I think that so much preaching that I hear now, as I scroll through social media and et cetera, is geared so much toward the, how can I say this? It's a lot of preaching about they can't go with you and they don't like you and you don't have to deal with them.
Haters are your elevator.
I'm like, are people really? And I've been through some stuff, trust me. Trust me, but there's so much that it bothers me because to me it fragments. It doesn't, and I said to my husband the other day, I said, people don't want to hear too much about discipleship, about what it really means to follow Jesus. There's not a lot of preachers, so I just see preaching as having, I don't know if COVID did it because we went through so much and it was so traumatic.
I think prior to COVID.
Do you?
I think for lack of a better phrase, I call it haters are your elevators preaching.
Yeah, that's what it is. Okay, I wanted to.
Yeah, that's what I call it. Haters are your elevators. And there's haters, this is your haters, your haters. And it's kind of a negative reinforcement, where you've concentrated on. And there is an element of truth because we all been through.
Yes.
And we've all had haters.
Yes.
That's not
They're going to be there.
That's not the issue, but it's the focus across so much of a preaching agenda. And, and
I just think we need to be careful. And the other thing that I want to say, my scripture, and I've often said this to younger preachers, Paul says, I beat my flesh into subjection, lest after I preach, I become a castaway. And I say to them, you're not your gift. Because you are gifted, and because you can stand and preach, and they say, Doc tore the house up, and all of that. But if you are not attentive to your own spiritual life, if you really don't spend time in the presence of God so that you are able to identify those places inside of you. And I'm telling you, Reverend Thomas, since my husband and I have retired, oh my God, we have seen so much about ourselves that we did not know. Because ministry can be a buffer to who you really are. Who are you really? And the success of ministry and all that goes with it now, we have to be really careful. And so you got to have that time with God on a regular basis so you can see. I'm seeing things about myself now, and I'm like, God, is this who I am? Are these the thoughts that are in my mind? Am I a jealous person? Am I insecure? God is revealing something. And so I'm talking a lot. I'm going to stop.
No,
These past 4 years have been the most difficult of my ministry life. But they are allowing me to see things about myself that I couldn't see when we had all the amenities that went with being Episcopal Supervisor and Bishop. And when that's taken away, you better know who you are and be comfortable with seeing things about yourself that was covered up by, quote unquote, all of the success of ministry. I'm done.
I thought you was about to go to your clothes.
I felt it coming. I said, let me stop here.
I was gonna kind of, sometimes to pass the eyes the organist because the organist missed the cue. I'm gonna tune your organist up. Thank you so much for Jess. This has been an awesome time.
Thank you.
And tell me the name of the church where you started, and
in St. Louis?
Yeah, the one you told me about.
Wayman, Big Wayman you used to call it.
Big Wayman.
Big Wayman AME.
It's still all over you. You have not lost.
Oh my God.
You have not lost Big Wayman.
You are something else. No, you really are.
The same person sitting there in Big Wayman that didn't know a call, didn't know nothing. You're the same person. You're the same person sitting here 77 years later. Is that 78? You told me 77, 78.
And looking good at 78, huh? You said I was humble, and I just...